I'm about to start a fire. The first thing that I need to do in order to start the fire is to gather up some smaller branches and the most dry wood I can possibly find. There are lots of different ways to start a fire. I did come prepared today, so I just have a lighter and a handful of paper towels. Also, while I gather up the smaller branches, I'm going to keep my eye out for sap from the trees, which is actually the best fire starter that you can use. Back in Alaska, I have used sap to start fires that you wouldn't have been able to normally. Even with a lighter, it's not a cure-all in Alaska. Having a lighter is only the beginning of the challenge of starting a fire back in Alaska because the wood is so wet and there's virtually no tinder that it's hard to start a fire up in Alaska, even with a lighter. One thing that I would do is gather up sap. Sap is a very good fire starter. I'd actually put it in an old spent shell from a 45, just the casing, and I'd fill it up with sap. And then I would put a small stick in it and then light that. It burns almost like a candle, so you can build your fire around it in order to start a fire even with wet wood. Some of these lower branches here, the mid-range lower ones, they're a little bit smaller, thinner, a little bit drier, so they make good fire starter. Once you have a nice handful, you want to look to see if you can find stuff a little bit thinner to work as better, more fire starter, where this would be kindling. You then want the fire starter itself. What we always call giant's hair works really well. I think other people call it like angel hair or something like that, but it is basically like the moss type stuff that grows on trees. Next up, a couple evergreen branches. They help build a good base of coal, and they have a pretty good amount of wood underneath the bark that will spark up pretty nicely once you get some heat under it. All right, in this area over here, there is some firewood style, regular like logs and stuff. And this will work good once you have the fire going to build the fire up higher. You can also peel off smaller pieces of it to use as kindling because it's actually like regular firewood essentially. I'm collecting the sap. Some people call it like amber for fire starter. It helps a lot. It's like fuel almost. So I've collected some of the sap and I've wrapped it in a paper towel and then smushed it all together. And it's a form of fire starter, essentially. I grew up in the bush, not like necessarily as like a survivalist, just in the bush. And in the bush, we just use what we have. And sometimes the best thing is like a thing of paper towel. The survivalist would take the sap and wrap it in like a leaf and stuff, which I also have done. But I have paper towel on me and it works better than leaves because it soaks in the pores of the paper towel and essentially becomes a literal fire starter stick. But that's the bush thing. Bush doesn't limit anything. It uses whatever it has. Now that I've gathered up most of what I'll need to actually start the fire, I need to find a spot to make the fire now, especially in the snow. That's one thing that you want to pick the best spot. I mean, anytime you do, but in the snow especially because the snow can be deep. And if you start a fire on deep snow, you're just going to be burning into the ground and you're not going to start a fire. So when you do find a spot in the snow, you want to make sure that it's not going to go too far into the ground or use stuff like these pieces of wood that I gathered to make a floor of sorts. It's also best to dig out the ground as much as you can. But right now I'm going to try to find the perfect spot to start a fire because I'm actually losing the sun and it's supposed to drop to at least 10 degrees tonight. A nice flat area right here. All right, I think I found the perfect spot. Right here. I'm gonna make a fire in this area right here. It's like a flat spot, and it doesn't have a ton of trees next to it, and it doesn't look like the snow is built up super high in this area, so the fire won't burn down a great distance once I get it going. All right, time to take the fire starter that I've gathered to the fire spot and spark up a fire. It's fire time, baby. It's fire time. Okay, I just gathered up the last piece here. This is just a piece of bark. I gathered it to make an essential ground because as I light a fire in the snow, it's gonna burn down. And essentially put my fire out. Today I brought a handful of paper towels and a lighter with me. And then I've gathered up stuff from the woods, like just small pieces of wood and tree branches, as well as a little bit of sap from the trees. And I wrapped the sap in a paper towel and then crunched that down, which basically turned it into a fire starter stick. So I'm gonna use all that and I'm gonna start up a fire. Now at the moment I only have one sap fire starter. I've thrown it in there, so I want to make sure to not waste it and get the fire built around it properly so it ignites. All right, I have the fire burning. The trick, though, is to keep it burning. So I want to put some of the smaller, thin branches that I've gathered up, stack them around to keep building up a bed of coals. Essentially, that's what I'm doing, is building up as much coals as I can. With coals, you have fire. If you ever are out in the wilderness and you manage to get a fire started, never, and I repeat, never let it die. And once you have a fire, all you have to do is sit back and enjoy the warmth of a nice fire on a cold winter's afternoon. Fire is really the center, the heart of survival. Without fire, you can't survive. With fire, you've got it made. The main keys that I used to starting a fire today was, one, being prepared. So what I brought with me a handful of paper towels, and I brought a lighter. If you don't have a lighter and you're trapped out in the wilderness and you don't have matches or at least a flint strike, it's going to be very difficult to start a fire, and it's going to take a long time. So that's one thing that you want to keep in mind if you are in that situation. Don't get discouraged. Stay at it. It's hard to start a fire using just sticks or even the bow stick method, but it can be done. It will take time. It could take even a week to start a fire that way, but it can be done. Today, I started this fire because I came prepared. I brought a lighter, and I brought a handful of paper towels. And then I used what the forest had to offer to start a fire. One of the main things that I used, which was key to starting this fire because the wood was a little bit wet, was the sap. I used a homemade fire starter sap roll, bush style, and that burns just like a fire starter. So when that ignites, you have almost a minute, depending on how much sap you put in it, to build firewood around it and to spark up a nice fire. Thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed me starting a fire. I'll see you next time.